There is a hum beneath everything. Not a sound exactly, more like a frequency, a constant quiet processing that never fully powers down. They wake with it. They carry it through the day. They lie in bed at night while it runs calculations they didn't ask for, replays conversations that ended hours ago, wonders about the nature of time or death, or whether the person they spoke to at lunch was okay, really okay, beneath the smile. Most people do not hear this hum. Most people can sit in a room and simply be in the room. But for these ones, the ones with minds that never stop, being in a room means noticing the room, the light, the tension between the two people by the window, the slight hesitation before someone laughed, the question beneath the question that no one acknowledged. It means being in 17 rooms at once. The physical room, the remembered room from childhood that this resembles, the imagined room where a different version of this conversation might unfold, the future room where consequences might land. This is not anxiety, though it can look like anxiety. It is not overthinking, though that word gets thrown at them often enough. It is something else, something harder to name. It is a mind that was built, or that built itself, for depth. They were always like this, or at least they cannot remember a time when they were not. Childhood, for them, was not a simple landscape. While other children played, they watched. Not from shyness, necessarily. From fascination. From the overwhelming amount of information that seemed to pour through every interaction, every facial expression, every silence that stretched a beat too long. They noticed things. Things that adults thought were invisible. The sadness beneath a mother's cheerfulness. The way a teacher's voice changed when she was disappointed. The difference between being invited and being tolerated. They asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Not provocative questions, genuine ones. Why do people say things they don't mean? Why does everyone pretend to be happy at funerals? What happens to love when someone dies? They were not trying to be difficult. They simply could not understand why no one else seemed to find these things urgent. The world, they learned early, was not particularly interested in depth. The world wanted them to play, to be carefree, to stop thinking so much. And so they learned. Not to stop thinking, that was never possible, but to stop showing it. They learned to keep the questions inside, to nod along with simple answers, to save the real thoughts for the privacy of their own skull. This was their first act of self-editing. It would not be their last. There were moments, though. Moments when the hum quieted. A summer afternoon, alone in a room with a book, the particular quality of light that happens just before evening, golden and thick. The book was irrelevant. What mattered was the feeling of being absorbed, of the mind finally having somewhere to go, something deep enough to match its depth. For an hour, maybe two, there was no gap between themselves and the world. There was just the reading, the thinking, the quiet satisfaction of a mind being fed, or a conversation, rare but remembered. Someone who did not flinch at the first real thing they said. Someone who leaned in instead of pulling back. The strange, almost disorienting experience of being met. Words that did not need to be simplified. Ideas that could be followed to their ends without apology. They walked away from these conversations feeling less alone than they had in months, and also sadder because now they knew what was possible and how rarely it came. These moments existed. They were not imagined, but they were islands, not continents. Most of life happened in the water between. There is a name for this, though it only captures part of it. Psychologists sometimes use the term cognitive complexity, the capacity to hold multiple perspectives, to see nuance where others see binary, to think in systems rather than snapshots. But that clinical phrase does not capture the experience of living inside such a mind. It does not capture the exhaustion of seeing too much, the loneliness of being unable to share what you see, the strange grief of understand people better than they understand you, and knowing they will never return the favor. Others might call it being an overthinker, but that word is a dismissal. It suggests a malfunction, a fixable error, a bad habit that could be broken with the right positive affirmation or breathing exercise. It does not account for the fact that this way of thinking is not something they do. It is something they are. Here is what it actually feels like. Imagine your mind as a room with 1,000 doors. Every question opens 10 more. Every answer reveals what it doesn't contain. You cannot look at a thing without seeing through it, behind it, underneath it. You cannot take anything at face value because face value has never been available to you. You have always seen the structure beneath the surface, the motive beneath the action, the fear beneath the cruelty, the wound beneath the defense. This is a gift. This is also a weight. Most of the time, it is both at once. The deep thinker learns early and repeatedly that their natural way of being is inconvenient. They learn it from the sigh that escapes a parent when they ask too many questions, from the eye roll of a sibling who just wants to watch the movie without a philosophical commentary, from the teacher who says you're making this too complicated, from the friend who changes the subject whenever the conversation gets real. The message is consistent. Too much. Too intense. Too serious. Too deep. Lighten up, relax. It's not that deep, but it is that deep. For them, it has always been that deep. They did not choose to see meaning everywhere. Meaning simply appears, unbidden, unavoidable. They did not choose to feel the weight of things. The weight is simply there, in every interaction, every decision, every moment that other people seem to pass through without friction, and so they adapt. They learn the performance of lightness. They learn to laugh at the right moments, to skim the surface convincingly, to hold their real thoughts like a breath they don't release. They become fluent in small talk while being starved for big talk. They become experts at making others feel comfortable, while they themselves are comfortable almost nowhere. This is the loneliness of the deep thinker, not the absence of people, but the absence of access. They are surrounded by others and yet perpetually behind glass, visible but not reached, present but not met. If someone sent you this, they are trying to show you something they may not have had the words for. They may have seemed distant when they were actually processing. They may have seemed cold when they were overwhelmed. They may have seemed difficult that they were simply being honest. They have lived in a world that tells them, daily, that their way of seeing is a problem to be solved. And perhaps, in sending this, they are hoping that you might see it differently, that you might understand. This is not a flaw. This is how they are built. They may not need you to fix anything. They may just need you to stop treating depth like a disease. The inner world of the deep thinker is vast and largely invisible. They may appear quiet while entire symphonies play inside their heads. They may appear calm while wrestling with questions that would take hours to explain. They may appear detached while feeling everything, every undercurrent, every unspoken tension, every flicker of emotion that crosses a room. This is the paradox. They feel more than most, and yet are often perceived as feeling less, because they process before they express, because they think before they speak, because their emotional experience is so complex that it cannot be reduced to simple statements, and so they say nothing rather than say something incomplete. People assume they are aloof. They are not aloof. They are overwhelmed. People assume they don't care. They care so much it hurts. People assume they are judging. They are not judging. They are trying to understand the situation, the person, themselves. Their mind is always running calculations not to condemn but to comprehend. And comprehension, for them, is not optional. It is as necessary as breathing. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that belongs to this way of being. Not physical tiredness, though that comes too. Something else. A depletion that happens when the mind has been running without rest, processing without pause, noticing without a moment of oblivion. It is the fatigue of a computer that cannot enter sleep mode. The weariness of a watchman who cannot leave the tower. They crave stillness but struggle to reach it. Even in silence, the mind continues. Even in solitude, the thoughts persist. The gifts of the deep thinker are not obvious. They do not announce themselves, but they are real. They are the friend who remembers the thing you said 6 months ago, the thing you thought no one noticed, and brings it up at exactly the moment you need to hear it. They are the one who sees you struggling before you've admitted it to yourself, who asks the question that cracks you open, gently, without force, because they know what it's like to carry things alone. They are the one who can hold space for complexity when everyone else wants a simple answer. The one who does not rush you toward resolution. The one who understands that some things cannot be fixed, only witnessed. They notice the person at the edge of the group who hasn't spoken. They hear the catch in someone's voice that everyone else missed. They know when a silence means peace and when it means pain, and they know not to fill either one unnecessarily. These capacities were not learned in a classroom. They were forged in the long practice of paying attention when no one else was. The deep thinker became a student of the unspoken because the unspoken was always louder to them than the spoken. And now, in adulthood, that training becomes a kind of service, not performed, just offered. A presence that makes others feel less alone. Here is something they may never have told you. They are tired of being told to think less. They have tried. They have tried distraction, medication, meditation, exercise, therapy, alcohol, work, love, and sheer force of will. Some of it helped. None of it stopped the mind from being what it is. What they need is not instructions on how to be different. What they need is permission to be this. Not celebrated, not fixed, just allowed. The deep thinker is not broken. They are simply running a different operating system than most. One that prioritizes meaning over efficiency, depth over speed, understanding over conclusion. This system has costs. It also has capacities that the world desperately needs, now more than ever, in an age of surfaces, when depth has become a radical act. They are not too much. They are exactly what they are, and what they are is rare. Slowly, so slowly it is almost imperceptible, something begins to shift. Not the thinking that will never stop, but the relationship to the thinking. The war against the mind begins to soften into something more like negotiation, then acceptance, then occasionally appreciation. They find themselves one day not apologizing for a thought, saying the real thing instead of the safe thing, letting a conversation go deep without pulling back. And the world does not end. The person does not leave. In fact, the person leans closer. They find themselves seeking out others who speak this language, not many, but some. Enough. Conversations that tez for hours and feel like minutes. Minds that meet theirs in the middle, that do not require translation. The relief of these connections is almost physical, like setting down a weight they forgot they were carrying. They find themselves one day grateful, not for the pain of it, but for the seeing, for the capacity to notice what others miss, for the depth that once felt like a curse and now, sometimes, feels like a core. It is not a straight line. There are still nights when the mind will not stop, still moments of unbearable loneliness, still the ache of being misunderstood. But something has shifted. They are no longer trying to become someone else. They are learning, slowly, to inhabit who they already are. And you, who have listened this far, whether you found this yourself in the dark hours, or whether someone sent it to you hoping you would understand, here is what matters. The mind that questions everything is not a broken mind. The heart that feels too much is not a weak heart. The person who cannot stop thinking is not failing to live. They are living at a different frequency, one that most of the world is not tuned to hear. This is not a flaw to be corrected. This is a depth to be honored. And if you are the one who carries this mind, if you are the one who has spent a lifetime being told you are too much, too intense, too complicated, know this: the world needs what you see. The world needs people who refuse to accept the surface. The world needs minds that keep wondering, keep refusing to let important things slide past unexamined. You are not too much. You are a deep thinker in a shallow time. And that is not a burden. That is a gift the world has not yet learned to unwrap.